African leader that has taken it upon himself to drive the course of the continent forward. Amadou, welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you for the intro.
Awesome stuff. Now, I have to say, this interview is long overdue. I remember more than a year ago, I think it was last year, January, I traveled to Ethiopia. At the time, I was working for Microsoft. I came to Addis Ababa to get an interview with you. I carried all my camera equipment, and I left with a job contract. I don't know how that ended up happening, but the good thing is that we do have finally the opportunity to talk. I'm more than glad, because we've had so many conversations over the last year and a half. I've been privileged to see, the kind of vision that you're able to carry. Your understanding of the African continent is really why I left Microsoft and I'm here at Gabeya. And for all those on the call, my name is Martin Ndlovu. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Gabeya, where previously I was the Head of Skills Development at Microsoft Africa. But this man who we're chatting to today is the reason I've come on this journey. And I think we get to have this conversation at a very interesting time. There's so much happening in the world. And I think the very first thing we need to discuss is, what's with this AI thing? like, can you just break this down for us? So much has happened.
Well, AI is artificial intelligence.
But what's going on? I mean, let's be serious. What the hell is going on? We're getting so many announcements left, right, and center. Technology companies all over the world. Microsoft, as you know, has started to take a lead in this race. Apple came hard a few weeks ago. But where is Africa in all of this?
Yes. So let's set the stage of African AI, right? So whenever you look at AI, there's three things to come to mind. The first one is data. You cannot build AI without having data that's structured, that's harnessed, that's curated to understand models to be coded against, right? Because machine learning experts need to code against data. So the first thing is the data. The second thing after the data, or even in parallel, is the infrastructure where the data sits, right? You need servers, you need data centers, you need cloud infrastructure, you need a lot of infrastructure to host that data. Then the other thing is the capital. We tend not to forget about it. It costs a lot to actually enable AI, right? So that's why you see that I think they project the investment in AI this year to be close to $200 billion if you combine all the countries in the world. So you need insane amount of data that handles the data collection, that handles the infrastructure, and the last piece, what I'm going to talk about, to really make it happen, right? Then the fourth element is the talent. By talent, we don't just necessarily mean those who are coding or those who are data scientists, even the entrepreneurs, those who take on the say, I'm going to build an AI company, right? So those are the four things that needs to happen, right, in order for AI to be sort of something that we can really talk about in Africa. Now, the last part, the talent, which is pretty much young people exploring, researching, coding, we have that. At least we have a chance in any revolution in sort of that happens in the past. Within AI, we have the youngest population on the continent to compete. Okay, and we'll talk about how do we make that happen. What we are missing is the capital, and I'll tell you numbers after your second questions. We are missing the infrastructure, and we have the data. That's the good news, but the data is not digitized. If you live in most African countries, paper trail is the rule. Whether you go to a business, the government office. So if it's not digitized, then you can code against it, right? So I think we have a chance with the talent part of it to use. We have a chance for the data side of things, but some of them needs to be fixed. And we're about to talk about that in an instance, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good breakdown. From the investment side, let's talk a little bit about that. We're starting to see external players. I think it was announced recently, Microsoft investing $1 billion in a data center in Kenya. Is that the kind of investments we want to see coming into the continent?
Much more than that. One data center in one country cannot serve, even that country, right? You're going to need multiple data centers, right? I'm looking at the numbers on what you need in terms of infrastructure for example, ChatGPT 3, forget 4 and 5, is 285,000 processors, CPU processors, 285,000 processors to run ChatGPT 3. Core, the graphic cards of that infrastructure is 10,000 graphic cards, and graphic cards are very powerful, right? So even the processing power is estimated to 800 petaflops. Go Google it, petaflops. So that's the amount of infrastructure you need. So that $1 billion won't get you that far, in a sense, right? So you need massive amount of investment in the infrastructure first, right? But it's a sign. Microsoft understand that, if we don't invest in this infrastructure in Africa, you won't be able to pretty much do anything in Africa in terms of AI. So I hope that gives you sort of a segue to understand where we need to go.
I mean, it does. But let's be frank here. Our GDPs are not as strong as those of Western countries, not even China and Russia. I mean, it's going to be really hard to compete on compute because it's obviously expensive. These chips are being built in Taiwan. There's a queue for those, and the first world is already first in line to get those that compute power. I think the UAE has done a very good job, but they have enough of the resources to make sure that they can bid for this compute power. As you mentioned, a lot of the data in the Western world has already been modernized, while in Africa, we still have a lot of legacy data. Our talent being our competitive advantage, yet still a lot of people don't have basic literacy, right? So with all of these challenges in mind, what chance do we stand to compete in this era of AI?
Very simple. So I think it's different phases of setting up the compute. Let's focus on the talent, okay? At least the people, right? I was doing a speech the other day at a conference in Ethiopia called Stride Ethiopia, and the young lady in the room stood up and said, how do we even start AI is going to take our jobs, start having this sort of fear of AI. So one thing I know in my life, the only way you can sort of at least, set yourself in a position where fear is at least controlled is if you understand, if you study what you're afraid of, right? So I think one of the things that we need to do in Africa is disseminate the information or democratize the information about AI. What is it? You don't need to be a coder. When we say AI, you don't have to be a coder or data scientist. What is it? Can you be even a lecturer or someone who understands the topic enough to discuss about it? We should be discussing in our cafes, whatever, right? No longer poverty and some of these things only. We need to discuss AI. In order to do that, you need to put the information out. So we need to have more edtech platforms, universities talking about AI at a different level of the different sectors. It doesn't have to be in IT. A pharmacist needs to know what AI is. A doctor needs to know what AI is. How is that going to impact they live in the future? So that's the first phase. Democratize information about AI. Just the same way we could talk about TikTok. We should be talking about AI anywhere in Africa, in your own local language, and so on. So, and that's the responsibility of a government. That's why I keep saying African government needs to have what you call AI sovereignty. What that means is what is your plan accordingly, right? That's the first phase. And then once you have, or while you're actually building up the knowledge about AI in Africa, so people are not afraid of it. I mean, we're afraid of a lot of things, but I don't think that should be a problem. Then you have a secondary level of people, the policymakers, the people who create the educational systems, and so on and so forth, needs to also be immersed into what AI can actually add in terms of productivity. That way, you don't necessarily need to have, a ratio between teachers and students to be insane. Like some of the most African universities today, you have one teacher, like 150 students, right? How can they sort of create policies, mechanisms, systems that allow us to sort of be more efficient in delivering education and healthcare? In Ethiopia alone, for every person, for every doctor, you have 20,000 patients. Can we figure out how do we create AI doctors, right? Because we're never going to be able to have doctors in Africa to cover. It's not going to happen. So those kinds of education around the people who matter in an economy, teachers, doctors, and lawyers, and so on and so forth, to be educated. Then the last wave of people that really need to get it, so we need to pay attention to, are the creators. Those are the developers, the entrepreneurs, and so on and so forth. How can we create more developers around AI, more data scientists, more machine learning experts, right? At a very massive level, then you have a balance. You have a population that understands AI. You have people that can actually have the mechanism of making it work on education, so on and so forth. And you have the creators. Then you create that sort of industry that potentially can compete.
Interesting point, especially to the last point, the creators, the entrepreneurs. For the last few decades, in fact, ever since a lot of the digital technology came to the continent, Africa has been a net consumer of digital software and services. Anything and everything we use is almost never created in Africa, right? From Facebook to WhatsApp to Telegram. How can we do it differently this time? It's almost like a reset button. How do we become the developers this time of the AI technology?
Right, the good news, there's about, as of 2023, there's about 220 plus AI companies in Africa. I was shocked myself. We actually have, I believe, 2 even in Ethiopia, which is good. But in China alone, you have about 3,000 companies, and that's one country, although it's a large population in that, right? And they started doing this AI thing a long time ago. So the question is now, what are the big problems we're trying to solve in order to encourage what you're saying, right? What are the big problems we're trying to solve in Africa? Healthcare, education, food security, right? Those are the 3 main things that needs to be solved. It's been proven already that AI can potentially solve that. So if I was an entrepreneur, and today I know that there's not enough doctors, say, in Ethiopia. I'm gonna use Ethiopia because I understand that context well. If there's not enough doctors and nurses that can serve the population of Ethiopia, what can I create to at least create less burden on the system? Let me give you an example. We know that these smartphones that we have today are getting better and better. What if the smartphone is the first entry point for healthcare? Meaning, when I'm sick, somebody, an entrepreneur, will develop this app. By the way, anybody who takes this idea, you can pay me royalties later. But I can use this app to very quickly scan my, whatever, my head and, whatever, check my temperature, even take a blood sample, right? And all that stuff. And that information is automatically packaged to a lab somewhere, right? Which now a doctor who's, can actually take a look at it and come back and tell you. So simple things like that. So the entrepreneurs needs to look at what are the biggest problems we need to solve at scale and build products that make sense. What I described, if you mentioned it 5 years ago, people tell you you're crazy, but it's possible. This smartphone is more powerful than some of these computers out there. What if you can create an app that allows you to do this kind of things, right? So that's just one example. So that's how we pretty much build the entrepreneurial spirit to build these solve these big problems using devices and AI to make it happen. I think that's how I see it, at least. Unless you have even ideas around that, Martha, because this is a conversation we had today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The way I see it is there's going to be lots of different avenues that people can take, and for the people on the call, I think a lot of them will be wondering, okay, in this new era of AI, where do I fit in? What particular pocket? What do I do to be relevant in this era? And I see it in three particular parts. So I think the first part is going to be the people who use AI to increase their productivity. I think it's important that everyone figures out how they can leverage AI to make themselves work faster, more efficiently, produce more, because ultimately a workforce of a country increases its productivity, then the economy grows. That's one thing. That's just being an end user. And I think this is particularly easy because there's a lot of material out there that teaches you how to use, whether it's ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever it is that you're using. That should be the bare minimum for every African out there, especially young Africans. The second one is the people who are going to build GPTs, or these general purpose technologies, but nuanced to specific use cases. So you gave some examples of hospitals. So maybe they use a large language model to serve patients faster. So someone has to build those. We need developers to go and take the models that exist out there. Hopefully one day there'll be a big African model that people can leverage. But hopefully we have people who take those models and actually build nuanced, very customized technologies. And then the last level at the top of the pyramid is the people who actually build the models themselves. And I know one or two people in Africa who've already started working on building their own models, which obviously are very expensive to put together. But we do need people in that level as well. So somewhere between those three stages, you'll find for yourself where you fit in. But I generally imagine that middle layer is going to grow really quickly. All those guys who used to be app developers, I think they'll start to become AI GPT developers or Copilot developers of some right.
I agree, absolutely.
Right. So let's just imagine that we do jump over all these hurdles and, we get the compute power. Strive Masio, I believe, is cutting deals with Google. Microsoft is coming on this side. Let's just say the guys from the UAE also help us out with some compute power. The talents that we have, education system kicks in, and we have a lot of people who are, digitally literate, and say also, we have access to data on the continent. Let's just say all of that is finally, there. It's in place. The stars align. What would the future of an AI-enabled Africa look like?
Will dominate. Because remember, the last part, the reason why I left that, the talent part, as the last four pillar for AI to be successful, is you're going to have young people are more creative than older people. Right? Once you reach your 40s, unless you really get yourself updated, you start wanting to be the status quo, right? So that young person that's going to be born in 2030, that young African is going to be born in 2030, going to have so much leverage over the rest of anybody else in the world. Because then they'll be born into an AI Africa world, right? Where at least we started to do certain things. We'll just dominate. There's no reason why. Now, the only challenge is this. We know the Google, the Microsoft, all of these guys are coming in building the infrastructure. That's why, again, AI sovereignty. Are we going to have our own capability of having our own data center? If the data still sit with the big guys, they're going to dominate the world regardless, right? You either end up working for Google, Microsoft, some of these big guys coming up, and you will not be able to contribute directly to your continent or your country. But I believe that the AI-enabled Africa would actually take over the world in any aspect you can imagine because of the population. Because remember, young people are digital. They don't want to, most likely going to use technology. Therefore, they're going to create it, and so on and so forth, right? And once you have massive adoption of at least what does it mean? Can AI, so you have to imagine yourself, can AI take Africa from where it is right now, at 1 and make it 100? That leapfrog we talked about, right? Mm-hmm. And how long would it take? And if you look at some things phenomenon that happened in Africa in the tech space or digital space, you look at the M-Pesa, what it did, right? Within 6-10 years, M-Pesa became fully sort of digital in terms of payments and become the beacon in the world on how to do mobile payments, right? That's just payments. Imagine now telling young Africans, oh, you can compete now because whatever you are doing, you can be more productive about it. Let me give you an example that ties into what you were saying earlier. And I think somebody asked us a question about, career path and all that. If you are a software developer, by the way, I was trained as a software developer, so I can speak on that. The way I was born from a software developer kind of mindset. The future in the next 5 years, your typical software developer will have what you call agents. They'll have 5 pieces of AI that potentially can do 5 jobs. So what will happen essentially is the company will come to you and say, hey, I know you have, the interview will go like this. What kind of AI tool do you have to help me build X, Y, and Z? It's no longer what kind of skill do you have, what university you got, who cares? It'll be like, what kind of AI tool do you have? Is it fast enough? Can you give me this feature within the next 2 minutes, rather than, oh, how long would it take? Okay. Then the developer will take that requirement, spin off his own agent that does the work, but nothing stops them from getting 4 or 5 other kind of projects to come in. And the software developer would be sort of just like a maestro, making sure the delivery is done, or double checking, and so on and so forth. Just like a graphic designer too. That's 5 years, these AI graphic tools would be insanely sort of things, right? So the graphic designer would be having 10, 20 clients that they can serve a day, because they'll have agents to go out there and do the thing. So that's how the future will be. That's what I'm saying. There's no reason why we should dominate, right? Having a young population that can create, or at least adopt even those agents and configure them, right? Configure those agency and those agents and make it happen. So yeah, that's why it's important to democratize the information about AI. No African should be afraid of AI right now. What we should do is learn about it, read more books, understand it. Right? We're at the bottom of what people consider in the world, right? That's what they perceive. By learning more about it, then they're like, okay, what can I do here? If I know I'm not even able to get a job today, I'm not globally competitive. Well, when AI is, we're all going to be in a level playing field. Well, let me see how can I make myself, and be more competitive in the future. So that's how I see it.
Interesting. I think there's a question coming in. By the way, everyone on the call, if you can just submit your questions on the chat, we will now be taking questions from the audience and posing them to the guest. So I have some questions here, Amma. First one is following up on Amadou's mention of AI. I'd love to learn more about the career paths it opens up in the field of AI within Africa. And he mentioned specifically Ethiopia. I think a lot of people are like, yes, we understand AI is obviously the next big thing, but what should we be becoming, What roles are we looking at?
Absolutely. The first one, if you're not a coder or you're a system, you're an information person, or you're not like necessarily in the high-tech things, the first thing is data. Right? Because remember, the first problem of all is if you don't have data, you can't have data. So every African country at some point going to wake up, oh, we need to digitize our data. So for at least 5, 10 years, 20 years, you get a job as a data analyst or data collector, whatever we call these things, right? That's the first level. And if the government's doing right, especially Ethiopia, we have a tendency of having the government is deciding. They can decide tomorrow, we have to digitize the entire data of Ethiopia. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. If it happens, there's tremendous amount of opportunity there. So if I were you in any field, even whether you're a coder or not, you need to learn about data. How do you understand it? How do you collect it? How do you, and there's a lot of courses out there. We have the Microsoft Talent Cloud, we have the Safaricom Talent Cloud. This is, specific to Ethiopia. You need to understand what does data really means in terms of AI. How can I get a certification as a data analyst or so on and so forth, right? And after the webinar, maybe I'll send a list of everything that's related to data. And the second level is infrastructure. As you see, Microsoft is about to spend $1 billion with G42 in Kenya to build the infrastructure. Well, you're going to need network security guys. You're going to need even cable installation. That bare bone stuff that's been done, in decades and across the world needs to be done. You have to build those data centers. So next level of skills is infrastructure. You cannot have AI or even data if you don't have the mean for which it's going to sit or be distributed, right? That's the next one. Now, the higher end though is the coding, the machine learning, the data scientist, which even if you're a math major, you can actually be a data scientist. Because data scientists, what they really do, they create formulas, right? For machine learning experts to take and code and field data, right? So there's so many, even take someone who graduated in agricultural science, you're definitely going to get a job in there. Why? Because right now we're looking at how do we make agriculture in African countries more productive? How do we even create new models around the seeds? Anything like that can possibly happen is wide open as long as you have the data. So there's different levels of things we have, because we're at the bottom. Like I said, we don't even have the structured data. We have so much time to get us what we need to do before we can actually be that AI of Africa to think about. That's the career path I see for anyone. Now, if you're a developer, it's a different thing. If you're a developer, you better learn how to use agents. Nobody's going to be patient enough now to wait for you to build on a site in 1 month. If you can't develop it in a few seconds, in a few minutes, maybe a day at most, they're going to go to the next competition, right? There's going to be marketplaces where you bid. I want a website, and they prompt it, right? I want a website that does da 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 da. You know, you pick it up, feed it to your agent. The agent does it and say, here you go, don't pay me. You know, and using crypto, whoever knows, right? That's the future. So if you're a developer, learn how to use agents or build your own agents, right? That is my answer to it.
I might add as well, cybersecurity, with the whole world going digital, data becoming gold practically. I think a lot of bad players who are now AI enabled as well will be going after that. And I think cybersecurity is going to be a huge industry growing in the next few years.
Sorry, I forgot about it, because some of the things that AI will do, so the data is not just going to sit somewhere, you have to collect it, right? There's a concept of most of what we know or heard about, the Internet of Things, IoT. So the fastest, even the example I gave earlier about the phone collecting data from the patient, stuff is IoT, sensors. That also another career path. The only way you can create massively AI data is partially to IoT devices. Even your laptop or any device you use will collect data on your behalf. So being an expert around IoT, there's different levels, right? It would be quite interesting to have. And the reason why now I'm tying it to cybersecurity, every device can be hacked. Think about that, right? Any device can be. So if you develop a device right now, an IoT that allows someone to collect some data from farming, somebody can potentially hack it, push data through it, and so on and so forth. So we need also, as you have AI, you need an army pretty much of cybersecurity experts to know how to sort of counter these, what they call it, hackers versus good hackers versus bad hackers, right? But at the same time, AI itself would even hack itself. You know what I mean? That's just, I can build an AI to go and hack. So we need equally number of cybersecurity experts that can protect our devices, protect our data, protect our borders as countries, right? And all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So that's another career path we need to look at.
Great. I think that answers Bisrat's question. Moving on to Getasu says, nowadays, a revolution of AI, the one frustration is that it's taking over the employees, as we are all aware of. How are you planning to change? I'm assuming this is directed at Gabea. Are you working on something regarding to AI for better development to help the younger generation from your side, your company perspective? I think this is a good one for you, Amma, to kind of take us through the journey of where we were versus where we're going and how that is in line with the AI movement.
Yeah, some of it I can't disclose what we're doing right now. So it's going to pretty much change the way anybody have opportunity in Africa. And one thing is for sure, the way the interfaces you're seeing today, whether we're doing this call or apps, downloading this, going to his website, all that stuff is going to be gone. In the future, you're going to be talking to your device. There's not going to be typing anymore. There's a reason why the entire English grammar, vocabulary, including French and even Chinese, is now accessible through voice. You don't need to type anymore. I think that keyboards, will disappear. So think of it that way. That's where Gabea is going, right? So we want to have maybe a technology that allow any African, whether you just want to get skill, you want to get a job, whether you are a construction worker or you're a graphic designer or you're a doctor, you want to get for opportunity, even access to finance, maybe you're a business owner, you're a startup entrepreneur. That's the next wave of Gabea. It's Gabea 4.0, but I can't say more to that. But we started off as a skill level, right? Company. We had a school, we built it up, had enough talent to say, you know what? Let's provide opportunity to this talent. Okay, cool. We built a marketplace. Yeah, we've done decently well, expanded very quickly to 30 African countries, provided job opportunity. But for me, it wasn't fast enough. Right? People tell me, why is it so slow? I said, well, think about it. Fiverr, Upwork, and somebody else. It took them 25 years to be where they are today. Because you have to build the supply and you have to build the demand at the same time. Most people, who hire African talent, there's a lot of problems they used to see. I was like, yeah, guys, this is going to be too slow. I don't have 25 years to do this. What can we do that's different? I say, you know what? Why don't we support other marketplaces? Why do we pretend we can do this thing? Oh, we're the first of this, we're the best of that. There's others who do what we do. We just don't know where they are. And can we find other entrepreneurs or other companies and organizations that care about what we care about? That's how we landed the partnership with Microsoft, right? We said, okay, we're going to be a talent cloud provider. Doesn't matter what sector you are. If you're looking for an opportunity as a doctor, there'll be a talent cloud for you. If you're looking for opportunity as a doctor, as a construction worker, there'll be one for you. So the idea was to say, let's be above and see how big is the opportunity, right? In that case, if Microsoft cares about jobs in Africa, why don't we work with them? And the reason why I know that the partnership level, and a lot of these startups in Africa don't like to follow that. They like to isolate themselves trying to solve a hard problem. Is the best case of partnership model that worked is Microsoft. Microsoft is the biggest organization in the world. They just rely on partnership. You know that, you work for them. As a matter of fact, they bought ChatGPT. The partner of them bought them. Therefore, now they're the most valuable company on earth because of AI, right? They have network partners. So if Microsoft have done it, conquered pretty much the world, as we know, PC world, and then of course the rest of it, Google and them came along. Gebaert wants to be that kind of company. Let's partner. Let's bring others who cares about what we care to do that. But now there's going to be at some point a shift. Okay, we partner enough. What's next? Which is what I can't disclose right now. But the next wave of it's definitely going to be around AI, maybe in a couple of years or so. But I can't disclose more than that. I'll leave it to that.
Great. All right. No, thank you. Thank you. I knew this question was going to come. When I saw it, I was like, this was definitely coming. This one's going to be interesting. What do you think the dark side of this AI domination is going to be that we don't notice today?
I watch all the sci-fi movie out there that talks about AI. I watched recently Atlas. That's going to be that. There's no way stopping it. This thing is moving so fast that, yeah, I mean, especially remember the agent stuff I talked about? Let's say you're a developer, you have 6 agents working for you. One of the agents sooner or later is going to be smarter than the other 5 too. They'll probably decide to be the things. And eventually they'll even guess what you're going to do. So the dark side, yeah, it's going to be, yeah, Terminator, all of that stuff. I won't be surprised if it happens. So we should be glad that we're behind in Africa, because then we will be the last to get the consequences. Absolutely. It's going to be, the concept of even warfare would be different. Because right now it's among us. We hate each other. Humans, we go bomb people and stuff like that. Guess what? When you have a common now, things are just trying to replace what you do. Because then you become sort of, okay, if you're not working, imagine yourself, guys, and you're in this call, some of you are working. I hope that most of you are working or run your own business. Imagine now you no longer get up and go to work. Imagine, remember during COVID, you can move. A lot of people have depression. I have depression. I had to get a coach, right? Imagine that thing. Now it's going to get worse with AI because AI is going to do everything for you. You're just speaking. So that's where we're going. So are we going to be useless? I don't know. But the good, like I always said, let's not think of it that way. We're so far behind Africa. We need to learn not to be afraid of it by understanding what it is. Then in the next 5 years, we can discuss that. How do we create, how does army will look like? How do we defend ourselves against AI? Not against another human being, because they're irrelevant, right? What's relevant is now we created something. The good news, we're the creator. We created something that allows us to be more productive. Like I said, I don't want to sit in doing 5 calls a day. I average 5 calls an hour a day, What if I can have an AI that does it for me, right? And then summarize it so I can make better decisions as a CEO, right? But then can I maybe have an AI that's the CEO at some point? What's the point? They'll make less emotional decisions and more practical decision on data, right? What does it mean to be a CEO? As a matter of fact, one of the investors I talked to recently is saying, in the next 5 years, VC will only invest in companies that AI sort of like
enabled,
like less employees, more AI. So you can have an entrepreneur who can potentially build $100 million company with no employees, because he can have an AI tool that does his finance when it does this, when it does. So it's not scary. It's just like, for me, it's interesting. Now, how do we prepare for it? Forget how the Chinese Americans are preparing for it. How do we prepare for it as Africans? Right?
Interesting one. Yeah. I have another question for you here from Tesfai. Sorry, from Ebenezer. Now, I have numerous certifications in various aspects of AI, and I've trained myself in different types of architectures. I'm eager to join the AI industry. Can you advise me on how I can enter this field? What's the starting point?
No, I mean, he has a certification. You just need to find out now a company that looks for those kinds of skills. Huh? That one is sort of, but again, you're competing against a lot of people. So, right? Maybe that's what it is. Because having a certification doesn't necessarily mean you have the experience. That's how companies now judge, right? Remember, I told you the future of hiring is no longer what kind of certification school you have. What have you done? Right? So if I were you, that's fine. Probably built an agent, I don't know, or built it on top of an open source tool or something like that to make yourself. So when you go to the interview, say, what can you do in AI? It's like, I built this tool. However small it is, the tool doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be, you'd be impressive. Wow, this guy's actually building AI. You need to be in a business, right, of building AI, the smallest level possible, or at least customizing AI, right, rather than just using it, customizing it. I don't know if you watch, there was a movie I watched recently where you take a robot and you change it to your own things, right? An robot exists. What I would also suggest you look at the open source community around AI. It's huge. There may be a particular project you're interested in and contribute, right? That way, when you go to your interview, you have something. You can't just go with a certification. That's not how it works, at least now. But I guarantee you, give it 2 more years, you'll be one of the hottest, potential staff that people look for. Because like I say, Africa is not ready yet. So there you have to position yourself to say, who's in Europe or America can hire me, right? Because Africa, they don't need your skills right now, or there's no things, right? If you patient enough and do what I said, go build your own on top of, modifying AI, do something so cool that when you show it to someone like, well, when we're ready to sort of hire these types of individual, they'll be available. I know Gabea in the next 2 years or so, we actually going to have an entire department with AI with hundreds of individuals just building models and doing things. So that's what I can advise you for now.
Also join the Microsoft Talent Cloud, because we will soon be joining or connecting companies that require AI skilled certified individuals to companies that require their services. So maybe a little bit of an ad there. ms.gabea.com. Check it out. Yeah. All right. Another interesting one. Ayodeji, would you advise someone who's a practicing lawyer to develop AI skills and combine the 2 career paths? That's an interesting question.
Absolutely. Lawyers, you're going to be obsolete if you don't Yeah. I mean, there should be a GPT that you probably modify. So depends on your country. The good news for you is maybe, I suppose this is in Nigeria, right? I suppose I'm going to suppose, or maybe UK. I think that's the
could be Ghana or UK. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So the only advantage right now you have as a lawyer in that country is the fact that you understand the law better than anybody else. However, if right now you're a lawyer in the US, you're pretty much into a lot of mess, because all the laws, everything in any state, in every sort of city, those laws already been digitized. And they're being updated. GPT, if you have access to a good GPT tool, will give you, you'll be able to answer it. You don't need a lawyer. You're probably going to need a lawyer when you go to court to defend the case and all of that, but you may not need it necessarily for contract writing, for discovery of how do you, for example, protect your trademark. You don't need to pay people. But in Nigeria, Ghana, some of these countries, the laws are not digitized, or if they are, they're very hard to get. People are protecting it. You at least have an advantage on it. But if I were you, I'd say, okay, you know what? How can I build, or how can I use a tool, an AI tool, and feed it all of these laws and data and be more sort of productive into going back to my customers? Or even have my customers pay me a fee to have access to this information using the GPT lab tool. So that is really what I think you should be doing. If I was a lawyer, I would do that definitely in that particular space.
All right. I think that answers it. This is an interesting one. So a couple of months back, we heard a lot about Devin, and there's some software engineers on this call. So they're wondering, should we stop practicing code? Is it over? Is it time to lay down the keyboard?
No. That one in particular. So it depends on how do you become, what kind of developer you need to be. That's really what it is. We still need developers, man. That's actually the most sought out. People don't realize it yet, but you're gonna need a lot of developers / machine learning people to build these models, right? In Africa, like I said, we need as many as possible. But the difference of a developer today, or even 2 years down the line, is how productive is that developer? You can't be that guy that's so cool, abrasive, you know everything. No, your boss can go and ask GPT, can you write me this feature because my developer is taking time, and your boss will take that code and give it to you and say, go code this. So you become then useless. Your goal is to say, how do I leverage AI 200% to be the fastest coder alive with less bugs? Either you can say, okay, I'm gonna use a tool like Devin, or you can use an open source tool and teach it how your coding style is, so that the AI agent, whatever coding tool, can learn your style, right? And even improve your style, right? It's like saying you're a soccer player. You're very good, in your local country. You shine it. Now you want to go to Europe. You want to go compete in wherever people go these days for soccer, football. When you get to that club, those guys will put you under pressure, right? In terms of doing a bunch of things that you need to know now how to do. You can't be just going that guy who just, improvise and think. No, now they want someone a little bit disciplined, a little more tactful. Even worse, have you seen in TV past 3-4 years? More than that, actually. There's this device that people wear. The soccer players are wearing, the football players are wearing. Because of data during that match, at halftime, the doctor can say that if this guy's played 30 more minutes, something may happen. So
predictive analytics. Predictive analytics. Yeah.
So if athletes need the device to tell them how to improve themselves, who are you? Like, you're writing code. It's not even physical. So if I were you, I'll figure out. Don't be ashamed as a developer. I know some of my developers here, they think, oh no, then I'll be obsolete. Don't be ashamed to be the best AI tool user as a developer. Otherwise, you're going to be obsolete. And eventually, you'll see patterns where you can write your own tool, right? Which you can sell to a company and say, you know what? I want to sell you a software engineer AI. Instead of me, hire me, no, forget it. Let me sell you this tool that does exactly what you want to do. That's how I will look at it.
Right. We're coming up on the hour. I'm also seeing some really interesting comments, like it's good and interesting to hold this kind of webinar in Africa. Ideas are born and grow in such expert discussions. Thank you, Adesu. We appreciate you. I know there's a few more questions, but as we're running out of time, I'd like to actually close this off by giving you the opportunity, Amadou, to give us a word of optimism. I know we've discussed a lot of challenges around AI in Africa, but what are you most optimistic about? Where do you see the sunshine?
Economy, right? Competitiveness, and I'll explain each of those. And then, like I say, a future of AI that's so crazy for Africa is out of this world. The economy is, the numbers don't lie. Let me give you a couple of numbers that research. So they're projecting that the generative AI, which will be like GPT and all that stuff, would be $1.3 trillion market by 2032. The question is now, how much of it do we want? Or are we going to be part of that $1.3 trillion? So economically, we can pretty much lift up or at least increase certain GDPs in Africa by just concentrating on AI. Because guys, AI is going to be the thing in the world. Just like the internet was yesterday, AI is going to be the internet is just going to be a utility, just like you pay electricity, right? AI is going to be. So if the economy projected the market value of AI in the next 10 years or less, it's going to be $1.3 trillion. Then we have hope that we can plug into it. And the reason why we have hope is because we have the young people that can play around with this technology. And we can play around it for another 100 years. Because what I've heard of by 2030, the average age in Africa, 50% of the world youngest population will be in Africa. I think it'll be about 25 years old. 25 years old, you have so much left for you in your life that we can't fail this if we really embrace and accept that AI is going to be the dominant aspect. Because can we control it in a sense, right? That's the first thing. The economy part of the things. The opportunities, right? Like I say, if we just as Africa decide to modernize our data, you can create so much opportunity for even jobs, entrepreneurs, and then eventually AI. Just the data. Forget the models, right? The models can come once the entrepreneur knows that they can train their model. If they can't train their model for the developer, then what's the point? If you can't have access to healthcare data in Ethiopia, how do you train a model? So just the data part of it, some of this low-hanging fruit that we just need to sort of look at. How do we get Africa's data from where it is right now to be digitized and modernized? Where would it sit though? Would it still on Google, Microsoft? That's sovereignty right there. There's a problem. Can be, another form of, if somebody else controls your data, then as a country is another problem, right? And last but not least is talent, young people. So we should be actually voicing more AI than anybody else in the world. We should be, right? There should be more influencers talking about AI rather than poverty, access to finance, all that stuff. Because all of those stuff can be solved technically in AI if you really look deep, right? If I were you, each of you should have a book about AI. Just read it. Some of you don't like to read. I think anyone between 30 and below, I know some guys have moments and we don't like to read that. But study this thing, right? This is actually, God has given us a chance. God and AI is a different story, but at an instance in time that we can definitely be better if we make sure our young people are immersed into this technology. That is really my sort of thought process, and I'll do everything I can, whether it's Keith Gabbard or myself, to go out there and push this thing, this idea. Let's get our young people ready, not be afraid of this thing. And let's be the one to even export AI, in the future to other countries, because those people want to be old. Some countries, will definitely be old, right? In that sense. What about you? What do you think, man?
I'm optimistic about the future. To be honest with you, I was a bit down initially hearing or knowing that, we had China that was the largest population. They grew their economy through industrialization. The same applied to India. It was literally our time now as Africans to take this opportunity. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how has it happened that when we have the world's largest workforce, AI comes into play and starts taking jobs? So I was really low. But then I realized that with such a young population, a lot of these young Africans, their first interaction with technology is going to be with AI. Now, this is going to be super powerful because these are people who are going to bring fresh, unadulterated thoughts and ideas to how AI can be used in their communities and countries. And because it's just so many of them using this technology, you can imagine what they're going to produce. So I'm super excited. And I'm really glad that we had this conversation. And on that note, I would like to thank everyone who joined today. Thank you so much for giving some time on your Saturday morning. We hope this has been useful to you. Thank you, Amadou, for your wisdom as usual. We really appreciate it. I'd like to thank the Gabbaya team in the back that has made this webinar possible and has monitored us throughout the time. And last but not least, I would like to thank myself for being such an awesome host. So everyone, thank you so much. We have many more of these webinar series coming through, so stay tuned in. We'll bring you a lot more cool and awesome topics. Cheers and goodbye.